Hey ladies and gentlemen, Stephen here from Redolessence. Welcome back to another video. Thank you for joining me today. And I know some of you recognize this fragrance even by the name alone. The fragrance is by Coty, of course, and it's called Preferred Stock. So make sure to stay tuned. Before I begin the video, I just want to say that if you like fragrance reviews here on YouTube, if you like learning about new and existing fragrances, and also if you like fragrance lists, top 10 videos and stuff like that, then please do consider supporting me and this channel by subscribing to it. That's the only thing I'm going to ask for. And also, before anybody asks, yes, I am wearing a t-shirt with a unicorn on it. It was actually my daughter's birthday the other day, and she happens to love it when I wear this unicorn shirt in particular, so I'm gonna try to wear it more often for her. So let's go ahead and dive into the review. So this is a fragrance that came out in 1990. So this is quite a few years old, about 30 years old now. And it's a fragrance that I recently acquired just because I always wanted to be in the know of some of these ancestors in perfumery and these predecessors, these fragrances that really paved the way for, the modern designer contemporary releases. And so there were a lot that I was just itching to get my nose on, or fragrances that, at one point I have tried, but then throughout the years I kind of forgot what they smelled like. And so I'm talking about fragrances like Aspen by Coty, or Gravity, or this one, or Navitus Parfums, or any number of other fragrances that seem to have come out within the past 20 to 30 years. And here we have a fragrance that is exactly 30 years old. And I was expecting it to smell a little bit more green, if I can use that term. I mean, I was looking on the back of the box prior to me actually smelling it for the first time. And it says, for the man with a sense of style, Preferred Stock, a sophisticated blend of sandalwood and vetiver with a citrus twist. And then I actually went on Fragrantica and I saw that a lot of people were saying that cypress is a really strong note in this fragrance. So I said, vetiver, cypress, this is definitely gonna be this sort of 80s powerhouse type fragrance. And I would say that it actually does sort of borrow a little bit of that influence from the 80s and perhaps the late 70s if you're thinking like Polo Green by Ralph Lauren. But anyways, I'm interested in dissecting the scent as much as I can. Let's start by taking a quick look at the presentation. So the box for this one is really cheap. I mean, you can tell it's this very flimsy cardboard, and I mean, this stuff has been around for a long time. You have the UPC at the very bottom. The serial number is punched into the box. The back also has some information and the ingredients are right there in the middle. Nothing going on at the top. The bottle for this one, again, very cheap, flimsy plastic cap. You see it doesn't have a collar on the atomizer there. I mean, really cheap sprayer, and there isn't much more to say about it. The distribution on the atomizer is wide. Let's continue with the smell. So I don't know if you can see this, but when I bought, I had like a 30 bottle haul, but they were all really inexpensive fragrances. And I sort of placed them in chronological order. So this one came out in 1990, so I didn't even need to look it up, because on the day when I did initially look it up, like 2 months ago or whatever, I actually wrote the year for all of the fragrances when they came out. So for a fragrance that came out in 1990, it smells it. And listen, this is not a criticism. I think that this is a pretty pleasant smelling fragrance, and it just sucks that whenever I review a fragrance that came out in the 80s or in the 90s or even older than that, I usually have to preface the review by saying this fragrance probably did not smell like this when it first came out. You guys know that with a lot of regulations in the perfume industry, a lot of companies are pretty much forced to either discontinue their fragrances altogether or reformulate year after year. And we see a lot of fragrances sort of having that fate. And it's unfortunate because a lot of these fragrances will be classics. People loved them when they first came out, and now they're kind of like a shadow of their former self. But this one actually does open up citrusy and musky. And I like the citrus that's used in here. It is a synthetic citrus. You're not going to get anything natural in this fragrance. And I don't know if at one point you did, but this is entirely synthetic, what I'm smelling here. And yes, I do actually have a few hundred raw materials, and I was able to, I would say I have a pretty good way of distinguishing if something is real or synthetic. The real smells are typically a bit more complex. You can tell they have a more defined, intricate, and complex structure to them, as opposed to a lot of synthetic ingredients. They're usually very direct in their approach, and they don't have that complexity, right? So they're overly simplified. And it opens up just very clean, fresh, citrusy, musky. And it's an opening that I think a lot of people would actually enjoy. You know, it doesn't smell overly green, despite the fact that it has the vetiver, it has the cypress, it has the oak moss in here as well. And, you know, it doesn't have all that much oak moss. And you guys know that oak moss is kind of banned as an ingredient, or at the very least, if you want to be IFRA compliant, you need to not use oak moss in your fragrances. I know a lot of companies still do, but in the case of this one, you're not going to get a natural oak moss, and you are going to get more of those other green notes, like this clean vetiver, but also this cypress note that's used in there. And it doesn't necessarily smell like an Italian cypress by Tom Ford. I do think that that fragrance is of much better quality. And this could have smelled quite different when it came out 30 years ago. But as of, you know, how I perceive it off this test strip right now, it's just very clean, citrusy, musky, green. There's a smooth element about it. I know I typically say sandalwood smells creamy. This doesn't necessarily smell creamy to me, but it does smell smooth. And so there is something about it that's kind of approachable. You know, I don't think it's a fragrance that's going to turn people off or anything like that. But when you think of a lot of other oak moss heavy fragrances, like let's say Lacoste Original or even the original Jaguar for Men, like you can tell those fragrances are quite green. Even Bogart Pour Homme, you know, that, I mean, these fragrances are really, really green. This one doesn't have that level of greenness, if that's even a word. But honestly, I think it's a very pleasing scent. It's a very pleasant scent. And I also find it to be the type of fragrance that kind of smells a little dated, for lack of a better word. I'm sorry, I don't mean that in a pejorative way, but typically when you smell some of the modern designer releases, you know that they're modern because they either have this overdose of Ambroxan or because they have this overdose of tonka bean. And I know that for a lot of people, that's not their thing, and that's cool. So I don't mean to use the word dated as a pejorative. You know, I'm not saying that it's bad to smell like it came from a previous date. I just mean that I think people will be able to smell this and say, oh yeah, it smells like one of the older, you know, more mature releases in perfumery, not necessarily something that came out in the past 2 or 3 years. That's the only thing that I meant, because I know there are a lot of older, more distinguished gentlemen that are going to leave a comment down below like, wait until you become my age and then you'll have, you know, not as much to say when it comes to that. I know, I get it. I've gotten those comments before. Please relax. But anyways, I honestly think it's an okay scent. I don't think it's that bad. It doesn't cater to my personal taste. It doesn't really resonate with me too much. Does that mean that I'm gonna throw it away or give it away? No, as a collector, like, I'm really happy to have it in my collection. And yeah, there's that. Let's go ahead and finish things off with my overall assessment. First up, in terms of the uniqueness and the overall smell, I would say at the time of its release, it was probably a little unique. I mean, I can see that it sort of borrows that green thing that's going on in so many of the fragrances that predated it. But at the same time, it takes it in a more fresh direction. But then when you think like, okay, GIT came out in 1985, Cool Water came out in 88, Aspen came out in 89. And so for a fresher take on those types of fragrances, it doesn't really go down that path. You know, it's not trying to be an aquatic or anything like that. It just so happens to have this clean, musky component on top of this sort of green oak moss cypress dry down. In terms of the longevity, I got about 5 hours on my skin, so it really wasn't great. In terms of the projection, it was okay for the first half hour to 1 hour. And I wanna say right around that 3 hour mark or 2.5 hour mark, it actually started to sit very close to the skin, kind of becoming a skin scent, which was unfortunate. Versatility is okay. There's definitely something about this that is traditionally masculine. I think that this is probably the fragrance for an older, more mature gentleman, not really a teenager in, you know, in high school or anything like that. I would probably wait until you're a little bit older in order to wear this one. But I think that especially for the price, I think it was like 10 or 15 bucks, you can wear this one casually. So it's definitely not the type of fragrance that I would save for a special occasion. I just feel like In today's world, there are far better options out there. And I think in terms of the presentation, it was, you know, really cheap, plastic. I mean, you can tell it's missing a lot of things, you know, the collar. Anyways, my final verdict on this fragrance is there's no surprise. It's not for me. It's not the fragrance that I would wake up and yearn to wear. It's just another fragrance that I happen to have in my collection that I bought with my own money that I think is okay. And for its time, it was probably a really good fragrance, but it's not the type of fragrance that I would recommend nowadays. And I'm sorry if I've offended anybody with this review, but scent is subjective. We all like different things. And I think it's important to really come to terms with that, right? And to realize that, hey, just because I like it and this person doesn't mean I'm right and he's wrong, right? It's how the world turns. So there you have it, ladies and gents. Thank you so much for tuning in. That was my review of Preferred Stock by Coty. If you own or have tried this fragrance, please let me know what you think. Go ahead and leave a comment down below. Also, please don't forget to subscribe for future videos. And of course, that includes fragrance reviews just like this, but also lists, giveaways, unboxings, special guests, interviews, and a whole lot more. Thanks again for watching. I love you all. We'll see you next time. Bye.